I was elected to fight for the people of this city. And whoever's in the way of that, get out of it.
Greetings and salutations, loyal viewers of this channel. My name is Sean, and today we got to talk about the purges going on in the city of Chicago. Now, we've highlighted all the different various problems with Brandon Johnson, the current mayor of Chicago, before, but this time it is completely outrageous because Brandon Johnson has been targeting the school board and the CEO of Chicago Public Schools for failing to approve a 9% raise for teachers, which might sound good on its surface, but the reason why the CEO, Pedro Martinez, refused to approve that is because it requires the city of Chicago to take out a high interest loan because they don't have the money for it, and he finds this to be incredibly fiscally irresponsible. So because the CEO is doing his job, Brandon Johnson has targeted all of the board members that sided with him, which is the board members, and gotten rid of all of them. A communist purge, as expected, from the communist mayor of the city of Chicago, and that's what we're going to talk about today. But before we do, I want to thank everybody who supports this channel via actualjusticewarrior.com/join.
Give me the money. Give me the money. Okay.
All 7 members of the Chicago Board of Education are expected to resign.
This as Mayor Johnson continues a campaign to oust CPS CEO Pedro Martinez.
Now, I appreciate the local news being straight up about their reporting, saying that Brandon Johnson is trying to get rid of the CEO because he stood up to him, because he stood up for fiscal responsibility in the city of Chicago. Because despite the clip that I played you earlier, where Brandon Johnson says anybody who doesn't lay down for his agenda has to get out of there, he's denying the fact that he has asked these people to resign, that he asked the CEO to step down, because Brandon Johnson is a former teachers union member himself, and he wants to do everything and anything to pay off this constituency.
Dawn and Scott, it's a shocking turn of events today. All 7 members of the Board of Education are going to resign. This as CPS CEO Pedro Martinez still has his job, and amid tense contract negotiations with the very powerful Chicago Teachers Union.
So first and foremost, right off the top, I want to point out that the wind is in fact attacking this local reporter's hair, and I do feel bad for him, but you know what? Chicago is called the Windy City for a reason. Secondly, and more importantly, yes, you heard that right. All 7 members of the Chicago Board of Education have resigned. They have stepped down, and this is due in large part to the pressure campaign that Brandon Johnson is applying, and also the one that he's denying that he is applying to these school board members in order to give a big fat giveaway to the teachers union at the expense of the Chicago taxpayers.
Now, sources who have spoken to the board members say they are leaving because of what they're calling a relentless pressure campaign from the mayor and CTU to fire Pedro Martinez for cause. Mind you, this is happening as early voting for the next school board elections begin, and 3 months before that new 21-member hybrid elected appointed school board takes place. But the mayor today, in a joint statement with the board, is framing today's house cleaning as, quote, a transition to a new board. In a statement saying, quote, with the unprecedented increase in board membership, transitioning new members now will allow them time to orient and gain critical experience prior to welcoming additional elected and appointed members in 2025.
So I need this to be 100% clear for everybody out there in the audience. If you believe Brandon Johnson's statement, the one that he issued right there about how this is actually going to help them transition to the new school board, which is going to go from 7 to 21 members, that's going to have a mixture of elected and non-elected members, you're an idiot. You're a fool. You're a buffoon. And honestly, you might be one of those people who voted for Brandon Johnson and doesn't regret your vote at this moment in time. Because the fact of the matter is that the only person who is advantaged, the only constituency who is advantaged by this is Brandon Johnson and the teachers union. Because now that they've all resigned, Brandon Johnson gets to appoint the replacements for those board members, and they get to vote for that raise, that they get to vote for that high interest loan that Brandon Johnson has been craving because he wants to bankrupt the citizens of Chicago in order to pay off this constituency. And again, on its own, if the teachers are doing a good job, cost of living is up, I'm not against them getting a raise. I'm not against them getting a little bit of help. But the fact of the matter is, Chicago's public school system is not doing well. Chicago's budget is not doing well. They spent way too much money on illegal immigrants in the city of Chicago, providing these services. Brandon Johnson has said that he's still welcoming to all these different various people. And the fact of the matter is, you just don't have the money to cover all these different costs. And Brandon Johnson's being being really sneaky about the fact that he's going to raise your property taxes in order to pay for this. But in reality, in actuality, it's just fiscally irresponsible for them to borrow money at such a high interest rate in order to pay the teachers today to damage the taxpayers down the line.
So let's fill you all in on this extraordinary chain of events here. So CTU asked for 9% raises and no layoffs. They can't come to an agreement. The school board passes a budget without a high interest loan that CTU and the mayor are seeking. The mayor tells Pedro Martinez to resign. Martinez refuses and write an editorial explaining why he refuses. The Board of Education then declines to fire Martinez, and then today, the Board of Education resigned.
So this is the timeline of events according to the local news, and I want you guys to understand out there in the audience that I agree that this timeline is the factually based timeline. However, it's important for you guys to understand that despite the fact that Pedro Martinez and all 7 members of the school board who recently stepped down back up what the local news is presenting here, Brandon Johnson is pretending that he did not tell Pedro Martinez to resign. He did not tell him to leave, and he's saying, oh, I'm not really pressuring all these people to get out. I mean, I am, and now that they're out, I'm so happy that I get to actually put forward my puppets into this position in order to bankrupt the city, but I'm not doing this. Don't worry about it. Pay no attention to where my allegiances actually lie and the actions that I've taken quite publicly in order to get to my objectives.
Now, we spoke to a pair of aldermen that called the mayor's explanation for all this lacking any credulity, and that today's maneuverings are, quote, a shocking case of dysfunction.
For the Board of Ed to be forced out because they're unwilling to fire the CEO who's being fiscally responsible, it's a shocking turn of events right in the middle of a contract negotiation. I mean, this is the 3rd largest school district in America, and we need to provide steady leadership, and this throws a wrench in all of that.
So here you have a regular, ordinary Chicago alderman who's speaking the truth about this, who's talking about how the CEO is actually doing a good job, he's acting properly. There's a reason why Brandon Johnson doesn't just get to make this decision directly, and Pedro Martinez is acting with the best interests of the taxpayers, and now they're all forced out, again, in the middle of an election season, in the middle of negotiations with the Chicago Teachers Union. And the fact of the matter is, I don't really have all that much sympathy for the Chicago Teachers Union because they labeled opening up our public schools, which we knew very early on during the pandemic was safe to do so because European countries did so, and they were not significant vectors of transmission, sexism, and racism. Oh my God, the evil white racists. How dare you expect kids to learn in person? Let us continue to get paid while not actually showing up to work. So I don't have any sympathy for the teachers union. Let me be clear about that. I can't stand Brandon Johnson. Let me be clear about that. But I also don't really know anything about the school board other than the fact that in this decision, they were fiscally responsible, and I think they deserve credit for that. However, they're getting nothing but condemnation from Brandon Johnson, and they're being forced out because Brandon Johnson is an authoritarian, and we all knew this was the case. We all saw this coming. It's on full display right here, and I just want you to understand that this is how people who run as progressives actually govern once they get into office.
I've never, ever in my 25 years in public office have seen any type of dysfunction, disorganization as you are seeing right now today. I really believe that they're going to try to appoint basically a rubber stamp board of his CTU colleagues and friends in order to give CTU everything that they want before this board takes effect.
So we just heard from another alderman, and honestly, I 100% agree with him. He is going to appoint, and I like the word that he used, his CTU colleagues, because Brandon Johnson was from the Chicago Teachers Union. That's where he was before he was mayor, in order to rubber stamp all of the demands of CTU, because that's who Brandon Johnson serves. And it's absolutely crazy to hear all these different various people who just got out of the Lightfoot administration talk about how they've never seen anything as chaotic as the Brandon Johnson administration. But that is the reality in this situation. For as bad as Lori Lightfoot was, again, there's a reason the residents of the city of Chicago voted her out in the Democratic primary. Brandon Johnson is significantly worse in every regard. Every single category, he's worse than Lightfoot, and we're seeing that on full display right here. And of course, the teachers union couldn't be happier because they're going to get exactly what they want out of this scenario. That's why they're changing the school board structure going into 2025. That's why they paid so much money to Brandon Johnson and donated to his campaign, because this is what they expect to get out of their puppet being in office. And Brandon, of course, does the thing that we always see where he represents the interests of the teachers teachers union, which again are the staff of the public schools, as what's best for the interests of the students, again, who aren't doing that well in Chicago public schools anyway, but Brandon Johnson still wants to chuck more and more money in their direction.
And now what happens? Well, Chicago public schools are plunged into a era of dysfunction and a lack of leadership. Several older people believe the mayor will now appoint allies that they believe will do the bidding of he and the CTU, fire Martinez, approve that high-interest short-term loan to help balance the budget and pay for a new contract all before January.
Now again, it's not just the two aldermen that we heard from. This is the perspective of the entire city council that are labeled aldermen in the city of Chicago, and none of us should be surprised by that. None of us should be shocked, because that's the whole point of pressuring all these people to step down so close to an election before this board ends up taking effect. Essentially, you're trying to do as much damage in order to aid and abet your constituency. This is the teachers union for Brandon Johnson before this new board comes in, because it has 21 people, and who knows how that new board is going to function. It's crazy in every possible way. It's obviously chaotic. Everybody can see that, but Brandon Johnson doesn't care. And again, he continues to lie to the faces of the residents of the city of Chicago by pretending he's not doing exactly what he's doing.
Now, this has all been rumored for several days. On Wednesday, we asked the mayor about it. He denied asking anyone to resign, and he dismissed all of this speculation as rumors. Well, we know they're no longer rumors. It is true, as it happened officially today. And Governor Pritzker weighed in, saying, as governor, he does not have authority legally to intervene in this.
Now, as you heard from the local news, there's absolutely nothing they can do in this scenario. And in fact, a recent update to this story, about 45 minutes before I started shooting this video, is that Brandon Johnson has actually appointed the puppet members of the school board in order to replace those people that he forced to step down. And again, I will point out, I will highlight that Brandon Johnson says that this is helpful for the transition to the new type of school board, but in what world, during the middle of negotiations with the teachers union, a month before the election, a couple of months before you actually have these people in office under the new structure, does it make sense to throw everybody out? Obviously, that's ridiculous, but that doesn't matter to Brandon Johnson, and you can actually see that reflected in how he acted after announcing his appointments.
When I ran for mayor, I promised to transform our public education system. I'm a man of my word. And that means bold leadership in a moment that doesn't nibble around the edges and look for incremental gain. Our people in this city are tired of political leaders that want the status quo to nibble around the edges, and then when children don't get what they deserve, they blame the very communities that they've disinvested in. Not on my watch.
So obviously Brandon Johnson makes this about race. Everybody knew he was going to go in this direction. Everybody understands that he is a one-trick pony. He has one card in his deck, and that is the race card. So nobody should be surprised by that. But I want to point out that he's doing exactly what I highlighted earlier, where he's conflating the interests of the students, of the children in the public school system, with the interests of the teachers union. He is not borrowing money at a high interest rate in order to make sure your kids get the bestest possible education. He's doing that in order to close a budget shortfall that he created. And in addition to that, he's trying to give the teachers a nearly 10% raise that they can't afford because they don't have the money, because there's a huge budget deficit. You think the children are going to benefit from growing up in a city that is in significant amounts of debt, that is going to require higher taxes on them when they start working? Absolutely not.
Status quo, the past mistakes that have left our students behind, we're not doing that. And then the so-called exports, the so-called fiscally responsible stewards are making the same argument when our people wanted to be liberated and emancipated in this country. The argument was, you can't free black people because it would be too expensive. They said that it would be fiscally irresponsible for this country to liberate black people. And now you have detractors making the same argument of the Confederacy when it comes to public education in this system. These are the people who package these gimmicks, lied to our people, stole money from our people, refused to pay into the pension system, left the taxpayers with the bill, and for me to fix it.
Listen, I just want you guys to understand, that is not AI generated. That was not me creating that in a lab. This is not an SNL skit. That's a legitimate argument put forward by Brandon Johnson. You're saying it's fiscally irresponsible for us to borrow money at this high interest rate in order to give the teachers union, who I am in the pocket of, their 9% raise. Well, guess what? You're just like the Confederacy. You're making the same argument that the slavery times people made about how it would be so fiscally irresponsible in order to free the slaves. What the hell is this guy even talking about? He's absurd in every possible way. He's ridiculous, a revisionist history beyond belief. But yeah, this is what this guy is bringing forward in this press conference. This is what he decided that he was going to argue again in public, and people are actually taking it seriously. You got people cheering for him behind him, obviously CTU members and other people that are his yes men and or puppets, and it's absurd in every way.
But we're going to build a world-class school district, you all. Because the vision of the status quo is to leave our children behind. Fire teachers assistants, fire custodial workers, fire nurses. That is their vision.
Yeah, it's absolute madness. Again, I will point out that Pedro Martinez just wanted to make a fiscally responsible choice. The board agreed with him. These are people who are all Democrats. These are people who want to put money into the public education system. But Brandon Johnson is such a radical that he pushed this even further than these people could tolerate. But instead of actually addressing that, instead of actually making the argument, he just says, you're just like the people in slavery times. Go back to the Confederacy, Pedro Martinez, because we all know people named Pedro Martinez, top 10 in all of slave owners in the history of our country. He's basically the descendant from Jefferson Davis for not wanting taxpayers of the city of Chicago to be on the hook for this high interest loan that blows out the budget. But you know what? Maybe you don't agree with me. Maybe you agree with Brandon Johnson. I would be shocked if you do. But if so, let me know down in the comments below. If you like this video, show them by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on the social media, support me via the support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about the absolute madness of Brandon Johnson. Till next time.